today my guest is Micheál Connors, the director of the Natural Academy, a not-for-profit eco-social enterprise which offers accredited training courses for organisations wanting to work with nature and for anyone seeking a career in health and well-being, ecotherapy and eco-depth psychology. So, Micheál, welcome. Now, a lot of people are talking about the importance of connecting with nature to find a sense of inner security or safety or healing. And the Natural Academy seems to be taking this deeper by working with ecotherapy and spiritual ecology as a kind of organic part of our health and well-being. Now, I think these are probably relatively new concepts for some people. So can you explain what ecotherapy is and spiritual ecology is?
Well, there's big questions. Let's dive straight in, yeah. Well, I guess to contextualize the need for ecotherapy or spiritual ecology or whatever we call the deeper nature connectedness that we can come to, I guess we have to go into the truth of our separation and our separation from ourself, from each other, from our communities, and from the natural world around us. And this journey of separation, which has been, who knows the absolute roots of it, but, you know, it's a long journey we've been on for many centuries, if not millennium. And, you know, that sort of place where we've ended up so separated from our own nature and from the natural world around us and from each other is really where we come in. And when we think of words like ecotherapy or eco-depth practice, which is the way we sort of frame spiritual ecology and coming into deeper nature connections, we have to think of that return to our truth as nature. We are nature, we're not separate. And the idea that somehow nature's over there and we're here is a falsehood. You know, the science shows us. So one of our great sort of drivers is the new sciences that are emerging that show our interconnectedness. You know, everything is interconnected now. Even the hard sciences like physics and chemistry and biology are all showing our interconnection. We're not separate beings. We need to understand that again. So, you know, even with the science, you know, bringing us forward back to a remembering of our interconnectedness, which we knew intuitively. We had it in our philosophies, in our religions, in our ways of understanding the natural sciences. That was a part of who we are, where before we decided or find ways to separate from that, maybe through certain philosophies that came in the sort of Enlightenment period and post that into Industrial Revolution and various other things. So that separation, I would say, is the core issue that has brought us to these multiple crises that we're now living within. And so the return to our interconnectedness is the journey of eco-psychology, ecotherapy, eco-depth practice. And so you know, that's where we start. We start with, we're separated and we need to return to ourselves, to each other, and to the natural world around us. And so that's the foundations. And then we have different models that we can apply in that. So when we look at ecotherapy, we're really looking at a healing journey. And the word ecotherapy is an interesting sort of etymology to it, because the word eco actually comes from a Greek word that really means home, or what we like to call dwelling place or inhabiting place. And so ikios, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing exactly right, but eco, the word we use in English, comes from that root and then the word therapy is also rooted in Greek, and it means healing. So what we bring together in ecotherapy is a concept, an idea, a framework that we like to call the healing dwelling place. This allows us to understand that our healing is a reciprocal process. It's not just about my own personal individualized healing. My individualized healing has an impact on my community, on the people around me, my intimate and loving connections. And it also has an impact on the natural world. It's an ecological event, our healing. And the healing of the natural world also has a healing on our communities and has a healing on me personally. So there's this resonant reciprocity. And that's how we see the healing dwelling place of ecotherapy. And you can't, my background in psychotherapy, and I know yours isn't that as well, Sue. In that world, it was very human-centered. We were working in rooms. It was about, and there's a real place for that. And
it really was very heady, wasn't it? It
could be, yeah.
Yeah.
It could be that. And there's great psychotherapy out there, and I really
Yeah.
some of the work that's done, and it's really necessary and really important that people have that really deep human to human relation. But there was always something missing for me, and that missing piece was always the rest of nature. It was part of the whole process.
So as a child, were you very drawn to nature? Did you kind of always feel that there was just, a lot of children are sort of, there's a sort of, they kind of know they're separated from something which they can't necessarily put words around, but there is this, and that's why they go into the fantasy land of, Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, because this desire to connect with something more. And did you feel that as a child?
Yeah, of course. And in Ireland, the connection to the land is still pretty close to the surface. It's still in the folk music, the folk tales, the stories of the land are still quite close to the people in a way, at least in my time they were. And this is, now I'm nearly 60, so it's like 55 years ago at least. And before then it was even closer. But, there's been a degradation of that. But yeah, so absolutely the stories of the land, but they were stories of the land. They were stories of places, and places were also woven into those stories. And the difference for me about fantasy and deep imagination, that we as human beings have an innate gift of deep imagination, active imagination, as Jung called it, and others in the sort of deep psychology world. And, that has been shut down in us so often because it's been seen as, in inverted commas, childish. And we have to grow up and we have to become something that doesn't have that amazing gift of wonder and curiosity and
we've lost
imagination.
We've lost the awe, haven't we? The sort of looking up at the night sky going, oh my God, there's something bigger. And I've always thought that before the Industrial Revolution, particularly, the land must have been so alive. And I've been conscious of that. And sounds would have been just so reduced to the clop of a hoof or the moo of a cow or somebody shouting. But this sort of sense I can imagine of things being utterly alive. And I love how Merlin Sheldrake talks about the mycelium, all the trees and the plants are talking to each other. And I believe this is, and I wonder how you feel about this, that I believe we have the capacity to do that, but as you said, we've lost that connection.
Well, I mean, coming back to the sort of deeper nature, you were saying, what's ecotherapy, what's deeper nature? I mean, and the sort of eco-depths practice, deeper spiritual ecology. All of that is about the reality that it's an animate universe. Now, so what does that mean? I mean, science shows us that all things are interconnected. We recently found the Bohigson particle, the God particle, as they call it, that showed that all things are interconnected. And there's amazing realities now being seen within hard science, that we are interconnected, that we are in a constant emerging, evolving, interconnected web.
I think, this brings back this whole concept of quantum physics as well, doesn't it? Like their understanding that if an atom is turned on one side of the universe, there is something else being turned on the other side.
Yeah.
And I find that this sort of sense
amazing.
Of quantum entanglement absolutely fascinating.
It is. But I think we as humans intuitively know that. interconnectedness and the way, so when you speak about us sort of being in conversation with the land or being in conversation with the more than human world, then of course there was a place for us in our sort of journeys of spirituality where that is and was a core part of who we were and are, that we go out and we would have intuitive knowing conversation with the land around us, and through that the deep wisdom of the ecological and the universal could come to us, and we could learn from that, and we could remember things that are, or have revelations of things that we couldn't find through our intellect or our discussions with each other. And that deep knowing, I think, is returning for us, the deep longing for that, because it's so missing. And the deep longing back to being wholly and fully human, who is the one that is in an interconnected whole land, planet, universe, and that we're all part of this amazing animate world and animate universe that is alive. And the word animate is really important because the word anima, the Cartesian split in many ways was all about deanimating the universe, deanimating the body, taking the soul out of things, taking the soul out of body, taking the soul out of material, and material determinism, which was that everything is dead matter. And of course, the word matter comes from mother, doesn't it? But dead matter, and that the only thing that really mattered was rationality and intellect and pure reason. And that was our search then, and that continues to be the foundational search for empirical science. But actually, what that did was it created a deep separation from our bodies, from the body of Earth, from the universe, from our interconnectedness as communities, as humans. And so we're recovering that. We need to recover that. And the Natural Academy is all about finding ways to do that.
Yeah. Now, I know you're a musician, and do you feel like that as a musician, this is an expression of what we're talking about, the fact that they're sort of interconnected, that the universe is working with you, if that's the right language for you, by the way, this sort of sense of something greater, or the universe, or whatever it is, working through you to provide you with a sort of way, a sort of physical expression. I've always been very curious about art and coming through, and it is the expression of something greater than us. Do you see where, do you understand where I'm going with this? And I just wonder, I know you've written this beautiful song, and we're going to be playing it at the end of this interview. How does that work for you? How do you feel about things when this information, or whatever you want to call it, creativity comes through you?
Yeah. Well, I agree totally. I think all great sort of art is channeled into that sort of place beyond our intellect, and something emerges through creation. It's a creative force. And sometimes that's uncomfortable and difficult. It's not easy, like any creation, birthing something, bringing something into the world. But ultimately, the things that are really matter to me and are really deeply meaningful have come through those channels and have shaped me and healed me and moved me. That's what they do. They move me and they heal me and they express something of my story, my own trauma story, my own story of Ireland. When this one's about, this song particularly was about the Scottish clearances. Actually, it came in Scotland, and it was about the clearances that happened there. And I was in a village, or near a village, where that had been cleared. And I was tuned into the ancestors, and this channel opened to that, and the song just came. The song, firstly as a melody, but then as words. And absolutely, I think that's where art comes from, real art. I think we can tinker and intellectualize art, but the true art is a constant emergence, and we all have that gateway. Every being has that gateway to creation. And, you
We're
know,
all, we all have that ability to express creatively in some way.
yeah, absolutely. And we all have, every human has that. And of course, it's been shut down through being made wrong and bad and not good enough, and all the stories that it's someone else is better than you, and all of those stories that have just shut down our creativity. So for me, a part of our recovery and the work we do in the academy is we bring creativity in. So when we do our trainings, a core element of it is creative expression. Like, how can you express your learning through creativity rather than just through linear, rational sort of prose and thoughts and learning sort of in bullet points. And that sort of embodies the learning and brings it into a deep connection to something more than us that is our constant guide to how we can develop as a practitioner and as a human being.
I was curious that you used the word ancestors, and I know that plays a role in the work that you do. Can you just explain how we can connect with our ancestors and why it's important to honor them?
So again, I mean, science again is pushing this boundary through epigenetics, you know, and one of the things that we're very closely aligned to is working with the idea of legacy trauma or collective trauma, and how we as human beings carry that with us, whether we want to or not, or whether we're conscious of it or not. And there has been so much trauma, collective, deep collective horror trauma in our recent history, never mind maybe in the millenniums before, but you know, there's been a lot recently, and it continues. We're in it now. And that's a collective trauma process. So for us, we as human beings are not separate, individualized, little hermetically sealed creatures. We are interconnected. We are constantly in a relationship with each other and with what it means to be human and our human collective, all of us. Whether we like that or not is irrelevant. That's just how it is. And we're also in connection to those that went before, because even our body is the genetics of our body. We live it. We live our ancestors. We are our ancestors. They're not in the past. They are here with us in our bodies, in our genetics, and we hold them. And it's so it does, you know, that's just a fact. It's not like that's not a sort of, you know, some sort of deep nature sort of visioning. It's actually just a fact that that's what it is, you know, and therefore attunement to that is really important for our well-being and health and our healing and our growth and our development as individuals and as collectives, as human. And I think one of the responses that's happening now to the multiple crises and that we're in is that realization of having to do that ancestor work, having to go back into those collective traumas, having to find ways to do that together. And you can't, one of the warning signs is not to try and do that on your own. It's not a single job. It's a collective, it's a community that needs to hold our recovery. We need to hold communities.
Yeah.
And so therefore meeting that ancestor work, you know, through that, you know, feeling into that and then imagining and finding our deep imagination in that and our embodiment of it, you know, that's a really powerful, deep journey of healing. And when we heal that, we're healing for the future. We're healing for the next generations.
Yeah.
You know, our healing is healing the next generations, you know.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, this whole concept of the collective, because I've always believed that one of my jobs is to feed the collective with as much positive or as much love as I possibly can, because there's so much fear at the moment and chaos and confusion in the collective. And as you say, we're susceptible to that. We have our own feelings, our own stuff going on, and then there's the collective. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of the power of the collective thought. And I think this is where panpsychism comes in, the fact that Rupert Sheldrake was talking about the whole concept that everything in the universe has memory.
Yeah.
Mind is an incredibly powerful thing for all of us. And I just wanted you to just to talk a little bit about, or explain a little bit more, or better than I've done there, just about the importance of our thought processes as part of connecting with the collective and also for ourselves.
So, I mean, I guess where I would go with that is, well, what is thought? That's a big question, and because I think we need to define that, because if it is just cognition, then that again is a story of separation. Actually, thoughts arise through embodied experience as well. So felt sense is there. And thoughts also arise with the imaginal, whether we are conscious of it or not. They arise with those other, what we call the windows of knowing the world. So cognition is one way we know the world, intellect and conceptual mind, but actually we know the world through our feeling experience and our sense experience and our imaginal experience. So we really feel, firstly, what is thought? It's a deep journey to understand and feel what thought really is. So I think, when we're bombarded with trauma imagery or trauma words or stories and narratives, then we have a huge sympathetic response going on in our body system, in our trauma. Autonomic nervous system is on high alert all the time. So thought arises from that. Thought arises from a sympathetic survival process. It arises from that energy, and that what appears maybe as something that we call cognition, like a thought in our mind, like an image or a words, or some sort of way that we conceptualize something. But it's arising from a sympathetic nervous response, which is really a trauma response. So the thought isn't arising from our wholeness, from our ventral vagal and polyvagal theory. It's not arising from our co-regulated space. And we have then a collective that is in that dissonance of sympathetic response. And we're all in it. We're all basically in a trauma response and a survival response. And all our thinking and a lot of our narratives and a lot of our information and entertainment, so-called entertainment, is arising as a collective from that survival sympathetic response. And that's our general cultural ground. And most of our cultural experiences are arising with that. And they're not arising from regulation. They're not arising from a wholeness of ourselves. So thought is endemically, in our cultural context, driven by survival. Generally, I'm not saying that's all the time, because we get regulated and we have places. Nature is one of them, or friends and family, and loving relation, or our own sort of internal capacities that we can develop regulation. And then thought arises differently, because it comes from
Change
that.
it, can't we can catch ourselves, and we're kinder to ourselves when we become conscious of the way we think about ourselves. I think that's the key, isn't it? This sense of kindness to ourselves.
Yeah, compassion. Compassion arises for us from wholeness. When we have a sense of who we are, we can embrace all that we are, including all the sort of parts of us that are challenging. We can embrace all of us. And that wholeness is compassion in action.
I'm just conscious of time. So, Micheál, could you just explain a little bit about what you offer, what your academy can offer anyone who might be listening and might be interested in connecting with you?
Yeah. So the academy was set up in response to all of this and more, which we could spend hours and hours talking about.
Hours, yes.
Lots of really rich, deep, meaningful conversations. And that's really what the academy is. The academy is a conversation with the world, and and finding ways together how we can recover and come back to our whole self and what we call our natural self. This nature of us and the nature all around us, the nature of being human and the nature of all life. And so ultimately it's within eco-psychology, that's one of the core sort of tenets of eco-psychology, is reanimating, coming back to life. And but how do you do that? That was the question for me. And yes, I mean, we can go and sit in the woods and have a lovely time and have a really deep experience of interconnectedness. But so what? We come home and it's back to the same old patterns and back to the same old stuff and back to the same traumatized world and the complexities that we live in. So we're really curious about how to step forward into the modern world with our modern truths and the technology and everything that we have to live with, but in a reanimation of who we are, both personally, socially, and ecologically. And that's really our core tenet, is the natural self, what we call the natural self, like reanimating the natural self. And how do you do that? So the reality then becomes like, okay, how do we engage with systems? How do we engage with the world so that we're not just in the woods having a nice time in an elite way, but how do we get out there and do it on the ground in the hard graft of that? Because it's hard graft. It's not easy. You know, there's a hard edge to it. And so what we've set up is the academy training is really about how can you as a practitioner start to develop the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the practices that you can apply in your community in a way that serves that community. So we have 3 realms of practice: nature, health, and well-being, ecotherapy, and deeper nature. And that for us these are like lenses to look at eco-psychology, to look at these big questions, this vast truths we live within. And they're lenses and they're useful. So nature, health, and well-being, we've developed a thing called Nature Well, and it's a program that can really support people who are maybe struggling with mental health issues or social issues or physical health issues. It's really health and nature. And we're working a lot with the NHS at the moment, going into, I just did a training yesterday with the forensic mental health team in Oxford Health, and you know, working with really complex mental health problems. But how can we bring nature into that? How can nature be a guide, a unifying field for us? So yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, and it's great to be doing that and working in the community and in the realities of trying to create community and build community. And then we have an ecotherapy model, which is more therapeutic. It's more like, how do you work with trauma and how do you hold boundaries and how do you work in the therapy? And then we have a deeper nature, which is more the spiritual, transpersonal depth psychology work. And so all of those are in our trainings, and we bring people on a journey over 3 years to learn how to work with those in their practice. It's called the vocational pathway. And then we work with individual organizations delivering CPD and sort of upskilling training called Nature Well, and mainly in Nature Well. So that's the one that we've been doing within the NHS and within environmental organizations. Because we want to bring nature and health back together, one health.
Well, all I can say is thank goodness you're here helping us all, because the work that you do, I just think, is exemplary. And you know, I had the pleasure of working with you, I think it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was 20 years ago, and I can't believe
Something
that.
like that. So it's lovely that our worlds have brought us back together.
Yeah, great, Sue. I'm really glad that you're doing this.
So wonderful. So Micheál, thank you so much. And we're now going to play out with your beautiful song.
Yeah, okay. So it's called When I'm Gone, and it was written in Scotland, in Argyll. So it's about death and dying, but also about ancestors.
When I'm gone.